Hello everyone, welcome to yet another sessions of the daily news analysis or by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper of the day and we break them down for our simplification and extracting vital information from them from the examination point of view. So with this, let's start with our first article for the day. The list of important articles which we have for discussion today are shown on the screen. Let's take up the first article for our discussion. Now the first article which appears on the screen talks about the Vedanta group puts up copper plant for sale, which is featuring in the newspaper, and there is an additional article in the text and context part of the newspaper talking about solving the Sterlite problem. Now both these articles talk about the issue of closure or sort of selling up of the Sterlite copper plant. This is the Sterlite copper plant which is located in Tuticorin, Tamil Nadu. So, Tuticorin region. So, we'll try to understand about the Sterlite copper plant. What is the issue? And how is it important for us from the perspective of examination? Now, as we can see, this copper plant does the important task of converting copper ore into refined copper. That is why this copper plant becomes very important for the Indian economy perspective, wherein copper holds a lot of usage in various industries. That is why this copper plant becomes very important. Additionally, it holds a lot of percentage of India's copper production as well. Nearly 40% of India's copper production was being done by the Sterlite copper plant. So that is why the activities pertaining to this copper plant become important for us to look at as to what exactly was happening, what stage is the plant right now, and other aspects about the copper industry in the country. So let's start about first the Sterlite copper plant. Now this copper plant is basically a copper smelting plant which was established in the Tuticorin region of Tamil Nadu by Vedanta group, and this was named as the Sterlite copper plant. So this copper plant did the task of converting the copper ore into copper, and this process was done by the process of copper smelting. But this plant was established 20 years ago. But within time, it was seen that, or the residents nearby the plant felt that a lot of gases were being, effluent gases were being excreted out from the plant, and which started to cause problems to the residents, such as respiratory problems, skin problems, diarrhea, water contamination, due to which the cattle in that region also stopped drinking that particular groundwater. And when the groundwater gets contaminated, a host of other diseases come into the picture. So it was seen that improper waste management practices by this Sterlite copper plant irked the citizens a lot, and they protested against this particular copper plant and demanded that this copper plant should be shut. This was the case for May 2018, wherein 13 protesters were shot at by the policemen, and they were killed in the incident. So due to this unfortunate incident, after 2018, this Sterlite copper plant was closed down and for further notice. And now finally the news has come, wherein the owner of the Sterlite copper plant is putting out expressions of interest, which means that they are putting out their intention to sell this particular copper plant. That is why this whole series of events with respect to the Sterlite copper plants becomes important for us to know. So this is where the events with respect to Sterlite copper plants stands of now. Now let's understand few details about copper smelting and what role do copper plants play. So first of all, talking about copper. Now copper is a ductile metal and commonly found in nature. It is a pure metal which is well known for its electrical conductivity. So its electrical conductivity with the quality of being ductile, right? It is mostly used in construction and plumbing industries and also electrical industries. Apart from that, it is also a strategic metal. Therefore, important applications are in energy electrical equipment and electronics, and nations are switching more and more to wind and solar, so which means that the energy diversification is happening, so more role for copper. This means new projects and transmission lines. There is a push for electrical vehicles as well, so therefore the usage and the demand for copper globally and in India is only set to ramp up. So therefore copper becomes a very important and fundamental metal for all various kind of industries in the country, right from major ones such as energy as well as electrical industry. So this is the importance of copper, and that is why production of copper in our country is of prime importance for us for consideration. But when we talk about the copper smelting plants, what are the dangers of these plants? Despite the wide use of copper, extractive metallurgical and smelting processes. Smelting is nothing but the process of converting the copper ore into refined copper. There are a lot of other sub processes involved in this, but the gist of it is converting the ore into refined copper. So in that case, this particular copper plant becomes a primary industry or a primary copper plant. But this process can be highly polluting, because during this smelting process, a lot of harmful air pollutants in high quantities such as hydrogen fluoride, sulfur dioxide, oxides of nitrogen, offensive and noxious smoke fumes, vapors, gases and other toxic gases and chemicals are released during this process. That is why the management of the waste excreted during this process is of much critical importance, which was found that allegedly it was not done in the Sterlite copper plant case, and that is why the residents around the plant also protested, and ultimately it was stopped from functioning for indefinitely. So this is the danger of copper smelting, which we need to take care of, because production of copper needs to be taken care of, as well as the environmental effects, ill effects of copper smelting also need to be checked. So that is why both these things need to be taken care of. And currently India produces about 8,70,000 tons of primary copper in 2017-18, of which 40% to 45% came from the Sterlite plant of India. This is why the discussion on Sterlite copper plant and its closing now, if it is selling it to some other person, it becomes of importance, because it used to contribute a major chunk to the country's overall copper production, which is around 40 to 45%. So now if what happens if this copper plant stops functioning? From a position where India was self-sufficient in the production of copper, where it used to import earlier, but at least a major chunk of its copper production was being supplied by by Sterlite copper plant. Now in the closure of this plant, India runs the risk of importing a lot of copper, and that is why India now imports copper at the rate of 3 lakh of tons a year, and the figure is only likely to grow, especially with the news of such an important copper plant coming to a halt. This import dependence on copper is only likely to grow. So what is the solution to deal with this? The solution is to design and operate modernized processing plants and smelters which can release gases with lower levels of toxicity. So you need to take care of the domestic plants and take care of their environmental implication, wherein we need to make sure that they are modernized and they release less and less toxic gases. This process can be applied not just for Sterlite plant, but also to all copper smelters across the country. However, such environmental projects can be relatively costly and many companies could hesitate. This majorly becomes a reason, which is why the private companies or the power plant associations are not very keen on employing these environmental safeguards. So that this is where government can help them with the form of subsidies in terms of equipment import or remission of duties on a lot of processes of waste management. So this thing the government can support to these plants, so that the dual task of producing copper in the country, so that we are less dependent on imports, which is such a strategic and fundamental metal, and also the environmental aspects of copper smelting and copper production in India are taken care of. So this was the discussion with respect to the copper smelting plants which we anchored from the closure or selling up of the Sterlite copper plant located in Tamil Nadu. With this, let's take a look at the important copper mines in the country. This becomes important for us from the static part. So the important copper mines exist in Rajasthan, in Khetri mines, Udaipur, and then Madhya Pradesh also is an important place for copper mines wherein we find in Amarkantak, and then Jharkhand is an important region where we find copper mines which is in Hazaribagh and Singhbhum. These are the places where major copper deposits of India are found. So, but can we see one thing? The deposit of copper ore is situated in this part of the country, but a major copper smelting plant was located in the coasts of Tamil Nadu. What can be the reason for the copper smelting plant situated so far away from the copper mines? You can comment your answer in the comment box below as to what can be the reason for this. What are the advantages of establishing a copper plant there? Right? You can comment your answer. With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. Now, the next article which appears in the newspaper talks about the Dutch disease. Now, what is this disease? Are we studying it from the science and tech point of view? In fact, no. This is a concept of economy, where we study it in the perspective of GS3. Now, Dutch disease is a concept of economy. We'll try to understand what is Dutch disease and why is it named Dutch disease, what happens when a Dutch disease is encountered, especially this is termed for a country, that a country is facing such a crisis, what are the negative implications on it and how can it be combated. So, first of all, what is Dutch disease? Now, Dutch disease is nothing but a country's, let's study about the phenomenon of Dutch disease, wherein the phenomenon of Dutch disease commonly occurs in countries whose economies rely heavily on the export of natural resources. So this means that the prices of those countries which rely heavily on the export of natural resources such as oil, gas, which we know are the Gulf countries or other such countries, and due to the heavy export of one commodity, the prices of other commodity domestically produced in the country go low, and this mismatch between the prices is known as the Dutch disease. Now, why is it known as the Dutch disease? Before that, the volatility of commodity prices cannot sustain a country's economy for long time periods. So therefore, the over dependence on export of natural resources. So if a country keeps on relies heavily on exporting just one type of resource, that is the oil or natural gas or other natural resources, what happens is that it leads to the underdevelopment of other sectors of the economy such as manufacturing and agriculture. So therefore, this plummeting of prices on the other side is the phenomenon of Dutch disease. Now, what is the story of origin of this term? The origin comes from the Dutch land. That is why the name, wherein in 1960s the Netherlands discovered gas reserves in North Sea. So as soon as they discovered gas reserves, they planned of exporting it. So the subsequent export of oil and the appreciation of the Dutch currency made Dutch exports of all non-oil products less competitive. So what happens is that if now oil is discovered, more oil will be exported. If more oil will be exported, the currency of that particular country, in this case Netherlands, its strength increases. But when the strength of the currency increases, yes, more forex reserves are coming into the country, but the export of other products which was happening from the country, will they face competitiveness? Earlier, where the exports were done at lower prices, now the exports will be done at higher prices. So therefore, the rise of Dutch currency due to heavy export of oil results into affecting the non-oil products, because they become less competitive on the world market, and due to this the impact accrues on the other sectors, wherein in Netherlands unemployment rose from 1% to 5.1%, and capital investment in the country dropped. Following this, over the years, the country witnessed a downfall in the industrial sector. So this domino effect of once the prices started to fall and the exports of non-natural resources or non-oil exports start to become less competitive, the situation of those sectors start to face a downfall. And this is what happened in the case of Netherlands when they discovered and relied heavily on the oil exports. Therefore, this phenomenon is known as the Dutch disease. Now, what are the negative implications? As we saw, unemployment rise, capital investment decrease, downfall of the industrial sector. So apart from this, the negative implications, let's look at the negative implications of the Dutch disease, wherein it is thought to be transmitted primarily via exchange rate movements following a large inflow of currency. So it first starts due to the large inflow of foreign currency, which comes how? When the discovery of oil is made, large amount of exports made out of the country bring in large amount of foreign currency, which again disturbs the exchange rate of the currency. It appreciates the currency of that country a lot. So as foreign currency is changed into local currency, the money supply rises and extra domestic demand pushes up domestic prices. So more amount of money coming into the economy, the money supply rises and it pushes up the demand, pushing up the domestic prices. That results in an appreciation of the real exchange rate, right? So this is what happens, and a resource boom increases spending on non-tradable luxury goods and services, those luxury goods and services which are not traded disproportionately. With increased demand and opportunities in these sectors, workers leave other sectors like manufacturing. So that is why boom in one sector resulting into the downfall of another sector, and thus production in these sectors decline, not necessarily because they are costly, but because they are not priority in the short run. So that is why we can learn from this Dutch disease that it is very important to not just rely on one kind of exports or product, but it is also important to diversify the attention in the economy and have the hands placed on the development of all sectors. So therefore, how can it be combated? First of all, a sound fiscal policy wherein the government, so what is the fiscal policy? The decisions on economy made by the government is the becomes the part of the fiscal policy. So sound fiscal policy will help the government assess the need and opportunities with respect to all kinds of export, and therefore maintaining a sound fiscal policy is very important for avoiding such a Dutch disease. And then, as we are looking, diversified spending, not just spending in one sector, but developing all the sectors is important to combat the disease. And then sound monetary policy. What was monetary policy? The decisions on economy made by the central bank, in India's case the RBI. So RBI's decisions are coming under the monetary policy. So a sound monetary policy is also important, because at the end of the day, more oil exports make up for increased money flow in the economy, and the central bank controls this money flow. So that is why a check on the money flow is very important to manage the inflow of money. The Dutch disease can be prevented if the central bank raises the banking system reserves requirement, which decreases domestic credit. So by increasing and decreasing the amount of money supply in the economy, the symptoms of Dutch disease for a country can be tackled. So this was a discussion on Dutch disease, which can be asked in the prelims examination, because the terms often come into news, especially when heavy rely on export of one particular commodity starts to happen, and it starts to lead to the downfall of other sectors in the economy. So with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article talks about BSES, or the Delhi electricity body, to install 50 lakh smart meters. Now, the news on smart meters is talking about that the BSES discoms are going to set up 50 lakh smart meters in Delhi households. So with this, it becomes important for us to know about the smart meters, which become important from either the science and tech perspective, because this is new intervention in terms of everyday governance, and also from the GS3 perspective, mostly from the GS3 perspective of science and tech. So let's study about the smart meters. Now first of all, this concept of smart meters is a long pending reform which the Power Ministry is wanting to do and has now initiated to do, is to transform the meter infrastructure, where we have our traditional meters and they perform certain functions, but now being outdated, they perform only limited functions, and a lot of other new age functions can be performed with newer meters. So to perform those functions, the Power Ministry is to transform the households and replace them with the smart meters. So what is the smart meters mission? Let's look at the scheme. So the move of replacing the normal meters with the smart meters is the Smart Meter National Program, which is being implemented to deploy smart meters across the country and is being implemented by the Energy Efficiency Services Limited, the EESL, which is a joint venture of PSUs under the Ministry of Power. So EESL is the body which is implementing the Smart Meter National Program. So this information becomes vital for us to understand from the prelims examination point of view. And this Smart Meter National Program aims to replace India's 250 million conventional meters with smart meters. And the smart meters procurement will be procured by EESL, because this is the implementing body for this particular mission. Now, what does smart meter do? What are the benefits of smart meter? So, how your smart meter helps you to take charge of your power bill. So, when we talk about smart meter, these new meters are fitted with newer technologies which give us a host of additional facilities to perform. And this becomes a matter of ease not just for the consumer of the electricity but for the discoms as well. So what are the various benefits? Wherein if there is a smart meter attached in the household, it measures and records electricity usage every 30 minutes. So the cycle of measuring electricity becomes efficient, and this data is transmitted to electricity distributors who own and manage the grid, poles and wires. Earlier what used to happen, the units of electricity, how much ever is being used, the people or personnel from the electricity board used to come and take the reading of the meter. Now this is being facilitated where the data can be directly transmitted, and then energy providers make consumption data, how much ever energy we are consuming, they make this data available to the consumers, which the consumers can access via a web portal. Now by accessing this data, they can make use of this data a lot, wherein they can monitor the household's energy usage to help compare offers and better manage costs. So it becomes a beneficial point for the consumers. And apart from the consumers, how does it become beneficial for the discoms? So the discoms are in for a lot of benefits because they obtain real-time energy consumption data of each consumer for subsequent analysis. So with this real-time data, they will be able to do better analysis and will pave the way for initiating various smart measures by discoms, like the time of day or time of use billing. So wherein they would be able to highlight the major part of the day where more energy was consumed, and prediction and management of peak demand. A lot of times not able to know the power demand, when it is going to peak up and when it is going to go down, hampers the functioning of these discoms, where because they are not aware that there could have been a peak of demand of electricity at this point of time, otherwise they would have ramped up their resources. So this smart metering would help them assess this demand and provide real-time energy consumption data to consumer, which we saw, and prepaid billing facility and remote connection and disconnection of load, accurate billing and other facilities. So these are multiple facilities which the discoms also face as benefits of applying the smart meter, right? And installation of these meters will also obviate the need for the meter readers visit to each and every consumer. Like I was saying, in a current scenario, the personnel from the electricity board has to physically visit the house and check the meter reading, which would obviously be negated by the Smart Meter National Program. So this was the discussion on the Smart Meter National Program, which is implemented by the Energy Efficiency Services Limited. So with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. Now the next article which becomes important and comes as a data point can be an important point for us to look at, which talks about a sea of waste, and this talks about the increasing importance of discussion on medical waste. In the 3 years of COVID-19 pandemic, we saw the amount of medical waste that can be generated, and this article talks about the same thing, wherein 68,500 tons is the amount of medical waste only the city of Shanghai produced during its recent COVID lockdown. This is the amount of waste, 68,000 ton of medical waste by just one city. We can imagine how much the level of medical waste could have been increased when we accumulate all other cities and the waste generated. So this becomes a major problem area which we need to deal with, where apart from up until now we were dealing with regular kind of waste, then electronic waste became a part of our discussion. So right now the discussions on medical waste are also going to take up a lot of importance. So this data becomes important, for which we can take notice of the increasing menace in the coming times, which has already started, but it is only going to increase, that is of medical waste. So this becomes important for us from the point of view of environment as well as science and tech. With this, we finish our important articles for the day. We'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles in the newspaper and their discussion. Thank you.